Thank you so much. I thank the organizers, and the host of this place, and of course the former speakers, because I learned a lot from the former speakers. Thank you so much. And in order not to repeat what people said, I didn't write anything, but I would like to put things in the frame, how I see the things which will lead us to the solution. When we talk about the Middle East of today, I would like to put things into a matrix. The one axis is the discourse, and the other one are the definitions. Discourse and definitions. When I talk about discourse, which what people say, which actually what they think. Here we see in the discourse axis, we see tension between tradition on one side and modernism on the other side. The tradition of the Middle East is the tradition of the group thinking. The religious group means if you're a Muslim, or if you're a Christian, you're Jewish, you are Alawi, you are Druze, you are Yazidi, you are Shubaki, you are Zoroastrian, you are Sabai, you are Mandai. 10 religions, more or less. There are only in Iraq, but in other countries as well. So first of all, the tradition of the religion. Secondly, the sect, which is a subdivision of the religion. Are you a Sunni? Are you a Shia? Are you Salafi? Are you Sufi? Are you a Catholic? Are you a Syriac, if you're a Christian? Are you, okay, the definitions of who you are and what you are and what group you represent. The third kind of group is the ethnicity. Are you an Arab? Are you a Kurdish? Are you Turkmen? Are you Berber? When it comes to North Africa, means all these ethnic definitions, because the relations sometimes are based on the tradition of the ethnicity. And a subdivision of the ethnicity is the tribe, the clan, the family, extended family. You can call it the way you like, Qabila, Ashira, this is Arabic, Fakhr, and all these definitions which are the same. Means the family, definitions which are derived from the definition, because if you are one of us, you are my friend, and if you are from another family, or another tribe, or another ethnic group, or another religion, or another sect, you are my enemy. Even if you live a kilometer from me, and even if we are citizens of the same country. Because if you think in a traditional way of these divisions of the tribe, ethnic group, religious group, and sectarian group, you are thinking in a traditional way. While the other side of this axis is the state, the modern state. Because the matter like Iraq, for example, or Syria, or Libya, or Sudan, but the state is a modern concept which came to the Middle East by the colonialists, as we heard from Mr. Bismuth. And this state actually tries to push aside all the traditional loyalties, all the traditional ways of definition, and only because you carry an Iraqi passport, you are the brother of everyone who carries the same passport. Could be you are Arab and he is Kurdish, you are a Muslim, he is Christian, you are one tribe, he is from another tribe, but the modern concept is that once you are Iraqi or Syrian or Libyan or Sudani, all the other people who carry the same passport are your brothers, friends, and you sit around one fire with them and sing Kumbaya together in perfect harmony, in one dialect. Okay? So this is actually the Middle East on this axis is torn, divided about how people define themselves, through the traditional definitions or through the modern definitions which make actually the state. And this is actually one of the biggest struggles, not only in every state, in every family, in every heart. What am I? Am I Kurdish or am I Iraqi? Am I a Muslim or am I a Syrian? How do I define myself? How do I define my brother? How do I see my sister? How do I see the other neighbors from the same street? And this, I would say, the chaos of definitions actually is the source of most of the problems in the Middle East as we see them today. This is one thing. Another axis of this are the definitions. What do we define? Either by traditional or by modern terms. This is the other. First of all, what is peace? Which we are all required to live in, if we are all Iraqis. Does peace mean that we marry each other? Means Muslims, Christians, Arabs and Kurds? Or we leave each other alone? What is the definition of peace between Syria and Iraq? Do we cooperate on everything, or do we leave each other along this border? And there's a big difference, because we all remember the tension between the Syrian Ba'ath and the Iraqi Ba'ath, between Hafiz Assad and Saddam Hussein. They had peace with them, but a peace not of cooperation and exchange, it was a peace of leaving each other alone because of threats. So, definition of how do you live with your neighbor, whether it's another religion, another state, is disputable, because everyone defines peace in another way. What is the state? That's the definition of state. Is state something which we want in order to be united under the banner of the state, under the ruler of the state, no, the leader of the state, under the law, under the flag, under the national anthem, under the idea of statehood, which we all serve and we all share on one side, in the modern definition, or a state is something which is supposed to serve my sect. If I control the state, let's say if I'm Alawi and I live in Syria. So what is the state? Syria. Is Syria a state which we all Syrians are brothers, Muslim, Christians, Arabs, or Syria is a device to serve the Alawi community against the others, against the Sunnah, as we saw already between 1976 and 1982 in the first round of violence between the government and the Muslim Brotherhood. Not to mention what happens now. So, the definition of a state is not clear. What is the state? Is it a device of everybody, or is it a device of the ruling elite? What is the regime? Is the regime somebody who we all believe in? Al-Qaid al-Darura, means they say in Arabic, the leader whom we all must accept? Or is somebody who took over by force and we are coerced to obey him, otherwise he will take us to the mukhabarat, dungeons of torture. So what is the definition of a regime? What is the regime? Legitimacy. What is legitimacy? What do we talk about? How do you create legitimacy of a regime? By elections? Free elections? What, did they have free elections in Syria ever? Did they have free elections in Iraq until 2004? Did they have any time free elections in Libya to create legitimacy to the regime? Or the regime takes legitimacy from the fact that he is what? Has the power. This is the verse above Hafiz Assad's tomb. Who doesn't understand it? It is very clear. So there is a verse in the Quran which says, obey Allah, obey the Prophet, and obey those who rule you. Means, even if he is an infidel like the Arabis. as some Muslims believe. Means, how do you create legitimacy? By force, by elections, or by the Quran? Okay? So these are totally different answers. How do you accept the other? As a kind of living with this. Do you accept him by welcoming him, by marrying him, by kissing him, by cooperation, by everything? Or you accept the other only as long as he doesn't come into your space? Means if he's there, he's acceptable. If he comes to you, means try to do something with you, he becomes a problem because he steps on your toes. And these are the problems which people in the Middle East so far have not yet solved. What is education? And this is a big thing, because we all think that the next generation, if only the next generation will be educated in a good way, the future will be much better than today. Okay? This is what you can hear on right, left, and center. Education. We have to invest in education. The United Nations is involved. There's many other international organizations are involved in education. Education. Education to what? But what are the content of education? What do you believe in? Do you believe in sectarianism? Do you believe in tribalism? What are your values which you educate your children to accept and to adopt and to love? Your tribal education or your state education, which is against the tribal thinking? What do you teach them to religious concepts, which in some cases see the other religions as the enemy or the infidel, or education to secularism, which will erase the influence of religions? So education as a word is actually empty. Because what are the immediate question is, what content do you put into the education? What do you educate your next generation to? And this is actually what the problem is. When you do not know what you educate your next generation to, you can either perpetuate the problem by educating the people to the same problems which you are doomed to live through and to suffer, and they will suffer from the same things, or you change the culture, you change the education. Means that you are now expecting parents to send their children to study things which are against the culture of the parents. I'm not sure that a parent will send his child to study things which he does not believe in, which will come home. Well, just imagine, concept of relations between men and women. Okay? Modern concepts talk about equality, talk about freedom. Freedom of women. In some places, or many places in the Middle East, this is something which is totally, absolutely unacceptable. Because freedom of women means a freedom of women to choose her spouse from wherever she wants. This is in some places unacceptable. A freedom of, let's say, a lady who is 20 years old to do whatever she likes, with whoever she likes. Okay, you know what I mean. Free relations between men and women. Totally unacceptable in many societies in the Middle East. So what do you educate your next generation to? If you talk about freedom and the child comes home and tells his parents that, well, yes, today we learned about freedom, that every man or woman is granted the freedom because he was born free, and he or she can do whatever they like as long as it is along the law and it doesn't harm others. I'm not sure that the father will like it, and will send the boy to the same school the next day as well. So when people do not know the definitions, the second axis of the matrix, the definitions of what education is and towards what people are educated, they are not going to cooperate with such an education. Okay? Because every parent wants his children to be a copy, nusha tibqa al-asl, as we say in Arabic, a copy of himself or herself, which is the matter. And this is actually one of the biggest problems, because much money is invested by the United Nations and other organizations in the world in order to promote education in the Middle East. Education to what? And this is the question, which is very hard to find a solution. So, since both the discourse and the definitions are problems, because it's a tearing these societies between modernism on one side versus traditional way of thinking, and this is actually the source of all evil in the Middle East, from Iraq in the east to Morocco in the west, from Syria in the north to Yemen in the south. If you really delve into the problems, you will see that these are the problems, the definitions and the discourse, and of course the conclusions which will derive from the contradiction between modernism and traditionalism. You have no other choice but to honor the societies, to honor the values, to honor the tradition, because changing culture needs centuries. Just look at Europe. What changes Europe went through. But these changes started, if I would say, in the early 13th century, since the Magna Carta Libertatum in Britain. The first time, which was in the early 13th century, the first time which a monarch started to give up on some authorities. And everything which you see today, democracy and everything, are derivatives of no less than 700 years of developments, setbacks, the revolutions, and turbulence in Europe, which, yes, the wars which we saw, the First World War, the Second World War, and other wars, were the results of the changing of Europe from monarchies until the 13th centuries to what we see today. This country also went through vast changes of how do we define ourselves, how do we define the group, what is the regime, what is the definition of the relationship between the regime and the citizen. This country also went through some ordeals through the years. Okay? Every country went through this. And today Europe has come to a point, after 700 years of changes. The Middle East started this process at the early 19th century when Napoleon came to Egypt and started to bring the modern times to the Middle East. Means 220 years, more or less. So what do you expect? That the Middle East within 200 years will pass what Europe did for 700 years? It is totally impossible. Totally impossible. That within 200 years we will find democracy, flourishing democracies. After we had tribal societies until 100 years ago. How can you change? How can you expect? This has to be very slow, because cultural changes take time, take effort, yes, take blood as well, as we saw in Europe as well. This is why, since we are now in this stage of turbulence, we have to find solutions. And solutions you cannot find by imposing Western or European solutions on societies which do not believe in man-made law, but Allah-made law. That's what they believe. They don't believe in freedom of women to do whatever they like. They don't believe in equality in some cases between Muslims, Christians, Yazidis, Alawis, Jews as well. And this is part of the problem of Israel as a state to be accepted. Okay, you have to change the culture before you change the regimes and the states. And it takes time, and it takes effort. This is why, for now, there is no other way to address the problems of the Middle East but by emulating the Emirate solution. Because in the Middle East, there is a group of states, the Emirates, the Gulf Emirates, which are flourishing, which are stable, normal states, legitimate state, and I emphasize the word legitimate state, because these states are based on the clan, on the tribe, if you want. Kuwait is the state of Al-Sabah. Al-Sabah is the leading family. Of course, they have some minorities, but the minorities have no political aspirations, and they follow the Al-Sabah family. And Al-Sabah, almost everything in Kuwait. Nobody fights, nobody struggles, and there are flourishing countries with oil, as it is in Kuwait, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi, or without oil, as it is in Dubai. Dubai has no oil and no gas. Maybe 1% of the GDP of Dubai is based on gas or oil. Why? On the other side, you see states full of oil, like Iraq, Libya, Yemen, Sudan, oil-producing countries, which are hell because of the disputes and struggles and multi-cultural structure of the society. And this is the problem, that when Britain created Iraq, when France created Syria, and when Britain made Yemen, and Italy was the godmother of Libya, those Europeans did not see these groups, they didn't care about these groups. And this is the source of all the problems in these unfortunate countries like Syria, Iraq, and Libya, and Yemen, and all this. Why? Britain learned from its mistakes in Iraq. And when Britain came out from the Gulf in the 60s into the 70s, they left behind them Emirates. Every one of them is based on one way of thinking, one group, homogeneous society. And this is why Dubai, without oil, is one of the richest countries in the world. And Libya and Iraq, with a lot of oil, are failing states. So it's not the oil in the Gulf. It's the social structure. The fact that every one of them is one homogeneous group which lives in peace internally, so they can live in peace with others as well. When you are internally fragmented and with struggle inside, you need an external enemy in order to unify everybody under your illegitimate aegis. And this is why Syria didn't make peace with Israel. Not because we were ready to get off the Golan, but Assad, Hafiz Assad, needed an enemy in order to galvanize everybody under his illegitimate aegis. And I proved it in my PhD when I wrote about the Syrian press. You can read it in English. So this is actually why creating the Emirate solution for every single state in the Middle East is the only solution which can bring life, stability, peace, prosperity, and any kind of future to this unfortunate region, which still suffers from the problem which the colonialists did not honor the local cultures of the states which they unfortunately built in the Middle East. Thank you so much.
I don't have a speech, but a comment. Interesting speech by Mr. Kedar, and the main thing is the integrity, conceptual integrity. When we thought about this conference, we thought to understand which models work on the Middle East, which models work in Russian Northern Caucasus, and whether certain models are applicable in different regions. What I'd like to say, the model of Mordechai Kedar, as to me personally, as I've been many times to Middle East, Israel, autonomous, Yemen, other countries, I understand this model. As far as Russian Federation is concerned, we see that Russia inside offers other models based on totally different things, supporting national cultures, supporting all national cultures, with simultaneous integration into the larger society. In a certain sense, with similar model, Russia is trying to apply it to Syria. Whether it's going to work or not, I don't know. But this difference in models, to my opinion, is very interesting. And this is something to be studied. We need to study all the models and see whether they are applicable in different situations, locations, and people and societies. That's why it's very interesting. Thank you very much. I'd like to give a mic to the host, the chairperson.